Okay, thank you. So yeah, that's all very, very interesting, and I want to start by saying what I agree on with the pro-life side. I agree on something you said. I agree that women should never, ideally, be in the condition to have no choice, so should never be forced to have an abortion. I agree about that. And the example you mentioned are good examples of a situation in which it would have been better, it would have been good if women hadn't been forced to have an abortion. But this has nothing to do with the morality of abortion. This has to do with freedom of women. So women should be always put in the condition to choose. And that's an argument that some anti-abortionists sometimes put forward, especially in the US. There are many organizations of feminist pro-life. So they say, what's wrong about abortion is that often it's not a choice for women. Often women are not in the condition to really choose autonomously whether or not to have an abortion. And that's bad, and I think society should do more in order not to put women in that situation. I also agree on something you said. I agree on the principle of equality. Except that I don't agree in the equality of all human beings. I agree in the equality of all human persons. So what is equal, what we should give equal consideration to are the interests of all people, all persons. So if two persons have two interests, whether they are black, white, young, old, man, woman, so those interests should be given equal weight. The thing is that fetuses do not have interests. Fetuses do not have plans, desires. So I agree on the principles. I don't think the principle does apply to the issue of the morality of abortion itself. Now another point. So that's really the core issue with my argument. So you said that if you accept the morality of abortion, then we should think that killing newborns is ethically acceptable as well. Yes, I think it is. And I think that's important. That's not just a philosophical point. That's not just a matter of finding an argument that is consistent. So we have to ask ourselves, what is at stake when we're talking about the decision of whether or not to have an abortion? It's not just the decision of whether or not to carry on with a pregnancy, so whether or not to have this 9 months or let's say 7 months, if you consider when the fetus is viable, of pregnancy. So a choice about whether or not to have an abortion is a choice about whether or not to have a family, a child, and that matters because the threshold for the viability of fetuses is going down. So like 10, 15 years ago, the viability was at 26, 27 weeks. Now it's 23. In 10 years, it will be even lower. So suppose that in 100 years, fetuses will be viable with artificial wombs as soon as they are conceived or like a few days after. Then we will have to ask ourselves whether women would still have a right to abortion, understood as the right to decide whether or not to kill a fetus, not as a right to decide whether or not to get rid of the fetus from their womb. And that's where the comparison between abortion and what they call afterbirth abortion or infanticide becomes relevant. So we have to decide what is at stake with abortion. I think at stake is the right of women to decide whether or not to have a child. It's not just about the pregnancy. And this is maybe something that I agree more on with the pro-life side and the pro-choice side. But that's something I found. So I always found out that I agree on many matters of principles with the pro-life choice, the pro-life side. I don't agree on how these issues apply to the specific issue of abortion, but we agree on these kind of things. To conclude, so Peter was mentioning many examples of wrongful actions, so actions that are wrong in itself, or was appealing to natural law theory, which is quite a common argument. Well, I would say that the entire enterprise of medicine is to go against nature. Medicine, the enterprise of medicine is not to allow natural processes to go on naturally, because otherwise we would all, well not all, but many people would be dead before they should. So nature does many, many bad things, and we have tried to go against nature for good reasons on many occasions, and I think abortion is one of those times in which human intervention can go against nature, because there is something important at stake. There is the right of women to decide whether or not to have a child. Thank you.